Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast, ready for today's top news headlines. It's February 28th, and we've got a lot to cover.
Let's jump right in.
The FBI is making some serious accusations. They're saying North Korea is behind the biggest cryptocurrency heist ever. We're talking about $1.5 billion stolen from the Bybit exchange.
It's pretty shocking. I mean, it even surpasses that billion-dollar theft Saddam Hussein pulled off from Iraq's central bank back in 2003. The group they're blaming is called Trader. You might also know them as the Lazarus Group. And get this, they're already converting the stolen crypto into Bitcoin and other currencies, trying to cover their tracks.
So Bybit is offering a bounty to try and get the money back. They've also set up a system to freeze the funds. It'll be interesting to see if they can actually recover any of it.
Yeah, for sure. This whole thing raises some serious questions about security on these crypto exchanges. And how do you even trace and recover stolen digital asset?
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, we've got a group of American investors protesting in Houston. It's over the demolition of their $250 million investment in Lagos, Nigeria, a development project called Win Homes.
This is a really troubling situation. The CEO of Win Homes, Stella Ifeoma, says they did everything by the book, got the permits, made sure the land wasn't in the way of any planned construction.
But then a new minister of works, engineer David Umahi, came in and allegedly changed the route of a coastal road, which led to their property being demolished. And it gets worse. Apparently, this demolition went ahead despite a court order halting construction while a legal case was in progress.
It's no wonder the investors are upset. They're accusing the government of corruption, and they're demanding a full investigation. This case really highlights the need for transparency and accountability, especially when it comes to foreign investments.
Couldn't agree more. Now, over in the UK, we've got some political drama brewing. Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Tory leader Kemi Badenoch are at odds. She claimed he took her advice on cutting the aid budget, but Starmer was having none of it. He basically shut her down with sarcasm, and even called her a self-appointed savior of Western civilization.
Ouch. Sounds like things got pretty heated. I guess that's politics for you.
Yeah, sometimes it gets pretty intense. But let's move on to some more positive news. Nigeria is about to test its very first domestically made helicopter. They're calling it the Nigerian Chopper.
That's amazing. So who's behind this?
It's the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NESANI for short. They say the helicopter is in its final stages of development.
This is a huge step for Nigeria. It shows they're serious about boosting local innovation and becoming less reliant on foreign technology.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. NESANI is also working on assembling and modifying aircraft parts they're getting from other countries.
So they're really trying to build a self-sufficient aerospace industry.
It's a pretty ambitious goal,
but definitely a worthwhile one.
Now, switching gears to the U.S., President Trump has issued an executive order to remove transgender troops from the military. It's a reversal of a policy from the previous administration.
So what's the reasoning behind this?
The order says that expressing a false gender identity doesn't meet military standards, and the transgender individuals would need to get special waivers to serve.
This is sure to spark some controversy. It brings up a lot of questions about transgender rights in the military and in society as a whole.
For sure. This issue is far from over. All right, back to Nigeria now. There's been a major development. Mamu, they got him in Zamfara State after a pretty intense gun battle.
Wow, this Nabamamu guy sounds like he was a real menace.
He was terrorizing communities for over 30 years, starting with armed robbery and then moving on to lead a huge bandit operation. With over 100 fighters under his command, they were imposing taxes on villages, kidnapping people, and launching attacks left and right.
It's hard to believe this was going on for so long.
I know, it's a really troubling situation.
So what happens now that he's been captured?
Well, it's definitely a huge win for the security forces, and it brings some hope to the people who've been living in fear for all these years.
I can only imagine the relief they must be feeling.
In other news from Nigeria, an Indian national has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for fraud. His name is Chandra Singh.
What did he do?
He was working for a company called African Natural Resources and Mines Limited. And he was found guilty of using his position to manipulate contracts worth millions of dollars, all to benefit his own company.
That's some serious white-collar crime.
The court also ordered him to repay over 345 million naira to the victim.
So at least there's some attempt at restitution.
Now let's talk about a controversy that's rocking the Nigerian Senate.
Yeah.
Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan has accused Senate President Godswill Akpabio of sexual harassment. And she says he's retaliating against her because she rejected his advances.
This is a very serious accusation.
She claims he offered her favors in exchange for a relationship, and that since she refused him, he's been making it difficult for her to do her work as a senator. Specifically, she's been trying to bring a motion about a steel company to the Senate floor, and she says he's been blocking her efforts.
So what's being done about this?
Well, Senator Akpoti Uduaghan says she has evidence to back up her claims, including messages and witnesses. And the Senate has launched an investigation into the allegations.
This is going to be a closely watched case. It raises a lot of questions about power dynamics and accountability within the Senate.
Absolutely. This is a story that we'll definitely be following closely.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
And that wraps up our coverage of the top news headlines for today, February 28th.
It's been a busy day in the news.
As always, we encourage you to stay informed and engage in meaningful discussions about these important issues.
Because these stories have real-world implications and they deserve our attention.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time. It's really disturbing to think about someone using their position like that, especially in a place like the Senate.
Yeah, it really undermines public trust. And speaking of trust, let's go back to that crypto heist for a minute. The FBI pointing the finger at North Korea is a pretty big deal.
It's a huge deal. I mean, we're talking about more money than Saddam Hussein stole. And when you consider all the sanctions North Korea is under, this whole thing takes on a whole new meaning.
It does make you wonder if this was a calculated move to get around those sanctions.
Right. I mean, that they need money somehow, and this could be a way to fund their regime.
It's a scary thought. And it shows how cybercrime isn't just about stealing money anymore.
It can have serious global consequences.
Absolutely. Now, on a lighter note, it's pretty inspiring to see Nigeria making strides in their aerospace technology.
Yeah, the Nigerian chopper is a big deal. It's great that they're working with other countries to get the expertise they need.
It's a sign that they're looking towards the future.
And it could have a ripple effect on their economy.
Hopefully it inspires other developing countries too.
Definitely.
Okay, let's shift gears back to the U.S. President Trump's executive order on transgender troops is causing quite a stir.
It's a very divisive issue.
The order says that transgender individuals don't meet military standards.
But a lot of people see this as discrimination.
It raises some tough questions about gender identity and inclusivity. And it's likely to end up in the courts.
This is something we'll be hearing about for a while.
All right, back to Nigeria. The capture of Kachala Hassan Nabamamo is a major victory in the fight against banditry.
This guy was a real terror. 30 years of crime. It's hard to imagine the impact he had on those communities.
I know it's a very dark chapter.
But hopefully his capture marks a turning point.
It's a chance for those communities to start healing.
But it's important to remember, this didn't happen overnight. There were probably a lot of factors that allowed him to gain so much power.
That's a good point. And those underlying issues need to be addressed.
We need to look at the root causes of this kind of violence. Things like poverty and inequality.
Absolutely. Now, in a case that highlights the global reach of financial crime, an Indian national has been sentenced to 10 years in prison in Nigeria for fraud.
This shows that corruption can happen anywhere, and that nobody is above the law.
He was found guilty of manipulating contracts to benefit his own company. And he has to repay over 345 million naira.
That's a hefty price to pay.
And it sends a message that this kind of behavior won't be tolerated.
Hopefully it serves as a deterrent.
Finally, let's revisit the controversy surrounding the Nigerian Senate.
Senator Akpoti Uduaghan's accusations against Senate President Akpabio are very serious.
It takes a lot of courage to come forward with allegations like that.
Especially when you're going up against someone so powerful.
The fact that she claims he obstructed her work after she rejected his advances is particularly disturbing.
It's a classic abuse of power.
The Senate has launched an investigation, and we'll have to wait and see what they uncover.
But this case shines a light on the challenges women face in positions of power.
And it underscores the need for safe and respectful workplaces. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
From international cybercrime to political scandals. And everything in between.
But one thing that stands out is the importance of justice and accountability.
We've seen examples of people being held responsible for their actions.
Whether it's a bandit leader or a corrupt businessman, it shows that the pursuit of justice is ongoing.
And that nobody is above the law.
We all have a role to play in holding our leaders accountable.
And in demanding transparency.
And sometimes it takes real courage to speak out against injustice.
But it's essential for a just and equitable society.
It's something we should all strive for. It's been quite a journey today, hasn't it?
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
From global cybercrime to political controversies to advancements in technology, and of course, the fight for justice and accountability.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But before we wrap things up, I wanted to leave you with something to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
We talked about that massive crypto heist and how North Korea might be using it to get around sanctions.
Right. It's a pretty worrying thought.
And it made me think about the bigger picture. The role of cryptocurrency in the global financial system.
That's an interesting angle. It's still a relatively new technology.
And we're just starting to understand its potential.
Both the good and the bad.
On the one hand, it offers a way to make transactions that's more secure and doesn't rely on traditional banks.
And it can give people access to financial services they might not have had before.
But on the other hand, as we saw with this heist, it can be used for illegal activities.
It's like any powerful tool. It can be used for good or for evil.
Exactly. So the question is, how do we navigate this new landscape? How do we harness the benefits of cryptocurrency while also protecting ourselves from the risks?
It's a tough question. It's going to require a lot of cooperation between governments, financial institutions, and the tech industry.
We need regulations that can mitigate the risks, but without stifling innovation.
It's a delicate balance.
So as we go about our day, let's all take a moment to think about cryptocurrency.
And its place in our world.
Is it a force for good? Or is it a tool for criminals? Or maybe somewhere in between?
And more importantly, how can we shape its future to make sure it benefits all of humanity?
Those are some important questions to consider.
Well, it's been a pleasure discussing these topics with you.
Likewise. Thank you for listening to the Today's Top News Headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.